Welcome to our Glen Oak High School Financial Aid Night. You're going to hear some very, very useful information about financial aid tonight. As many of you probably know, that the FAFSA just opened October 1st, and you're going to hear some information presented here tonight, and also get to ask some questions as well. So we're going to have two people speak. First is going to be Kim Leggett from the Canton Student Loan Foundation, and then she will hand it over to Kurt Drotliff from Kent State Stark, and he will be disseminating just general information about financial aid. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kim.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name's Kim Leggett. I'm the director at the Canton Student Loan Foundation. The foundation was established in 1922, so we're celebrating our 95th year this year. Our mission is to provide low-interest student loans for graduates of Stark County high schools, and we've been doing that for the last 95 years. In order to be eligible to apply for a loan, the student must have graduated from a Stark County high school. They have to have and maintain a 2.0 GPA, and they have to be enrolled in school full-time. So once you look at all the scholarship and grant funds that you receive, if you're still looking for, need some assistance, we're a really good place for you to come to. We have very low interest rate. Our interest rate is 6%. However, the effective rate's about 1.5% to 2% based on the length of time students have that money interest-free. It's interest-free the entire time they're in school full-time. So it's interest-free for 4 or 5 years. If they go on to grad school, longer than that. We don't have any fees. $3,000 is available per year for a maximum of $12,000. If students come to us later than their freshman year, we're also able to help them. Sometimes we have sophomores come to us, juniors, seniors, and then we let them try to borrow the maximum amount that they can. The only thing is that we don't give seniors $12,000. We'll do $6,000 for juniors, and we'll do $6,000 for seniors. We do have graduate school funds available, so if a student's a borrower of ours and they choose to go on to grad school, they can borrow funds for that. It's $4,000 a year for a maximum of $8,000. Students can go to any school that they choose as long as it's accredited. We give the check to the student. We do not give the check to the school. So they can use it for any kind of expenses that they need, room, board, computer, books, living expenses throughout the year, whatever they need. The applications are available starting in January, and the deadline is June 1st, and that's a hard and fast deadline, so it's really important that if you're interested in borrowing, everything has to be to us by June 1st. The applications will be on our website starting in January. We have a brochure out there. It looks like this, so if you're interested, you might want to pick one of those up and take a look. All the information you'd want to know about the foundation is on this brochure. We disperse about $1.6 million every year. We see about 150 to 180 new students, and they're only Stark County students, and then we do about 300 repeat loans every year. So about 1.6 million. And the reason we're able to do what we do is because we have students who are currently repaying their loans. Once you graduate, you get a 3-month grace period, and then you start to repay the loan back. It starts off at $100 a month the first year, it goes to $150 the second year, $195 the third year, and it never goes any higher than that. Sometimes you hear stories about some of the loans that students have to pay back, and they're really large payments every month, and we don't work that way. If a student borrows the full $12,000, it takes about 7 years to pay the loan back if they pay according to that schedule. So we have students who are paying their loans back right now, and we use those funds to turn it right back around and give to new students. We also have a membership of organizations and individuals in our community who donate to the foundation because they want to help a local student with their education. 100% of what people donate to the foundation goes directly to a student. None of it's used for operating expenses. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can share. Does anybody have any questions for me? Nope. Okay. If you have any questions, you can call the number. There's myself and 2 other ladies that work there, Sandy and Lori, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Again, our brochure's out on the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name's Kurt. I'm a financial aid counselor at Kent State University Stark Campus. It's my task to go over a presentation on federal financial aid. A couple things I want to mention. There is a handout at the door a copy of the PowerPoint we're going over. So hopefully you picked up that, and if you want to take notes or look at it later on, that's great. Also, it's a generalized presentation. It's not specifically geared toward Kent State. Federal financial aid is driven by governmental regulations, so schools do it the same way. Let's see. Also, if you have a question, let me know immediately. Just shout it out or raise your hand, give me a signal. I'll answer it right then and there for everybody. I'll repeat the question for everybody. Don't be shy. If you have a question, chances are other people have the same question, or too shy to ask, or they don't even realize they have that question. So please don't be shy. First off, a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. The federal government's philosophy on financial aid. Second, the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA. How do you go about applying and submitting the FAFSA online every year? We'll spend a lot of time on that. That's the biggest section. Types of financial aid, both gift aid that you don't pay back, grants and scholarships mostly. We'll also talk about self-help aid, which is loans and federal work study. The government considers federal student loans to be a type of financial aid. You may disagree, but that's their attitude. How to determine college costs, we'll spend a little time on that. How to determine your direct costs. Finally, a timeline of what to do, when you should submit the FAFSA, when should you expect the award letters to start arriving, etc. And finally, a couple upcoming events. Okay, first of all, the government's philosophy of financial aid. It's available to everybody regardless of family income or college costs, but it's the primary responsibility of the family to pay the educational costs to which they're able. Once we start talking about specific amounts, like how much is the biggest Pell Grant you'd be eligible for? How much loan money is a freshman eligible for? You'll realize that they really mean that. Okay, let's start. You apply online nowadays. It's strictly online. The very first thing you do is obtain a username password at this website, sfaid.ed.gov. You sign in with your username password. Also, the parent has to sign the FAFSA with their username password. So it's very important. The first thing you must do, the student creates their username password. One parent also creates their username password. And again, here's the website. It's on the handout. A couple tips. Like I said, one parent and the student must each apply. It's a process. Read the directions carefully. It tells you just what to do, but they ask you to create challenge questions. You make up your own challenge questions also, which I've never seen before. There's a couple ones that you get from a drop-down list, but there's a couple that you create on your own. Eventually, they ask you for an email. Use an email that you have immediate access to, because they send you an email right away with this confirmation code. You use the confirmation code to finish out the process, and you have your username password. Then your parent will go back to that main web page, and they'll go through the process themselves, and they'll create their username password also. The student and the parent should not use the same email. It will stop the process. I'm not sure if they're worried about fraud or something along those lines, but the parent should use a different email from the student, and the parent will get their user or email with a confirmation page, etc. But again, it's very important that you do this first thing. Create your username password first thing. And then it's good forever. So when you submit next year's FAFSA, you're going to use your username password then also. The second bullet there, parents with current college students who were students themselves, they've had this username password process for only a couple years now. If you're a parent who did a FAFSA a few years ago, or maybe several years ago, you used to sign in with a 4-digit PIN number, and they phased that out. We have learned that if you have your PIN number handy, it will go easier for you when you create your username password. So that's what that second bullet is about. Any questions on this section about username password? Yes. Her question, that's a good one. Her question is, what happens in the future when you have other children? The parent will use the same username password for each child. It's your username password for life. So let's say 2 years from now, your younger son does his FAFSA. He'll sign in with his username password that he just created, but you, the parent, will sign it with the username password that you created a couple years ago. Follow? Good. Anything else right now before we move on? Yes. Good. His question, he has twins. Each twin will get a username password for themselves. Parent will get a username password. You're going to have to do separate FAFSAs. So the one twin will go in, work their way through the FAFSA, submit it. The second twin will also, right afterwards go in. Some of the questions will be the same, but it won't automatically populate for the second twin, like address, things like that. Now, when the student does a second FAFSA next year, when they renew a FAFSA, then a lot of the information populates again, like address, social, date of birth, etc. Does that answer the question? Okay, good, good. Anything else before we move on? Very good. Okay, here is the FAFSA website. Free application for federalstudentaid.gov. Make sure you go to FAFSA.gov, not FAFSA.com. If you Google FAFSA, FAFSA.com might appear above FAFSA.gov. Don't accidentally go into the wrong website. FAFSA.com is an independent organization that will charge you. And it's free. It's the free application for federal student aid. So if you accidentally get to the wrong website and you get to the part where they're asking you for $95, just exit out, go back to the correct website and start over. Okay? Another thing I should mention before I forget, make sure you pick the correct award year. You seniors are going to complete the 2018-2019 FAFSA, which is strange, it seems so far in the future, but you've got to pick 2018-2019. This current year's FAFSA, 2017-18, is also available right now because there's current students who want to start in the spring semester. They need to do the 2017-2018 FAFSA. So make sure you pick the correct award year, 2018-2019, for you seniors. I think it's going to be the default setting usually, but be careful. But again, once you have your username password, the student will click login and then they will type in their username password and you'll be able to log into the FAFSA. Your username password is immediately ready to go. So when you create your username password, you can go right to this website and you can log in immediately. There's no delay. Just like with the username password website, read everything very carefully. They're very specific, very clear on what they want. Try to avoid typos and errors. Transposing numbers. If your social security number starts with 301, do not say 103. When it comes to your date of birth, they specifically say month, day, year. So if you are born April 12th, 04 is 12, not 1204, etc. Use your name as it appears on your Social Security card. So if your son's name is Andrew, but he goes by Drew, put down Andrew on the FAFSA. Because the government will run your name, social, and date of birth through the Social Security database, and it has to match exactly. What else? Divorced or remarried parent is a popular question. If it's a divorced parent not remarried, you list one parent on the FAFSA, and it's almost always the parent that the student lives with. I guess you'd call it custodial parent. Technically, it's that third bullet, list parent on FAFSA who pays 51% of students' expenses, but again, that's usually the custodial parent. And only their financial information. If the parent is divorced but remarried, you must include the financial information for the parent and step-parent. That's just the rule. So if you remarried Bill Gates or something, that's just the way it goes. Be careful with things like parent and student income mismatch. Let's say the parent makes $30,000, but the student has a part-time job and they made $4,000. Don't transpose those amounts. There's a student section of the FAFSA, and the adjusted gross income is $4,000 for that one. And then there's a parent section on the FAFSA, and that would be where the $30,000 goes. Those types of mistakes, you'd be surprised what people do, so try to be careful about that kind of thing. Report income and taxes paid in appropriate fields. Again, be careful. They will ask you questions like adjusted gross income, amount of taxes paid. Let's say you make $30,000 a year and you paid $3,000 in taxes. Don't transpose those amounts. If you put $3,000 adjusted gross income and you paid $30,000 in taxes, the government's computer is going to flag that as a mistake, and it's going to delay the process. Okay, next. Okay, this is a big section, the IRS Data Retrieval tool. You may have read in the news last year they had trouble with this and it ended up being taken down. Well, it's back up and running. And the government and colleges encourage you to use this. When you're working your way through the FAFSA, they ask you a question for 2016, did you file tax return? If so, did you file joint? Did you file single? Did you file an amended tax return? Depending on your answer, it will take you to this new website for the IRS Data Retrieval tool. I'll get here. Okay, now that's another thing I forgot to mention. The FAFSA is based on income from 2 years previous. So for you seniors, it's a good idea to dig out your 2016 income tax return and W-2s, students and parents. It'll go faster for you if you do have that in front of you. But again, 2016, if you've done the FAFSA in the past, it used to be previous income from the previous year. It's not like that anymore. It's 2 years previous. So everybody's done their 2016 tax return. Even if you filed for an extension, that's over with. Everybody's completed their return. So nobody has to estimate on the FAFSA anymore. Another hint, when you fill out this page, they're going to ask you for your address. Use the address as it appears on your tax return exactly. So if you live on Apple Grove Street and you wrote out the word street on your tax return, write out the word street on this. If all goes like it should, and it should, when you click transfer now, it's going to pull over a lot of your financial information from the IRS and automatically populate it on the FAFSA. So you won't have to answer questions like adjusted gross income for 2016, taxes paid for 2016, because it has pulled over. So it's faster, more convenient, and more accurate. Good? Okay. Okay, there's a question. Let me walk up here. I think what you're talking about, once you submit the FAFSA, it takes the government's computer several days to update. You get an email telling you that your FAFSA has been processed and that you should check what's called an SAR, a student aid report. The student aid report is a summary of all the answers you put down on the FAFSA. It is a good idea to go back to the FAFSA website, log in, and look at that student aid report carefully and try to catch any mistakes early on. So if you made a mistake, try to catch it then and make a correction right away. I think that's what you're talking about. Because when you're working your way through the FAFSA, you're automatically going to be taken to this page. And once you click Transfer Now, if it works like it should, you'll go back to the FAFSA website, and a lot of the income questions you won't have to answer at all. Correct. His question, will it automatically link to the IRS? Yes, it will. When you put your address in right here and then click Transfer, it will automatically take you back to the FAFSA website, and a lot of the questions won't be there anymore. It'll be already answered. Questions like adjusted gross income, taxes paid, etc. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anything else right now before we move on? This is a important slide. For years and years, this was kind of the holy grail where they really wanted to make this happen, and they finally reached the point where, because it used to be you had to answer each of those income questions on your own from the tax return. But if this works for you, you don't have to. And that's another thing. If it doesn't work for you, it's not the end of the world. It takes you back to the FAFSA website, and you would simply keep answering the questions in order. And again, the questions are specific. When it comes to adjusted gross income, it will specifically say what line to use on your tax return depending on what tax return you used. So if you used a 1040EZ, it'll tell you line 10 or whatever. If you used a 1040A, it'll say line 14 or whatever, if it comes down to that. The government does ask for assets for student and parent. There's questions about cash, savings, checking, real estate, personal investments, UTMA, UGMA, I can never remember what those mean. It's Uniform Transfer to Minors Act and Uniform Grants to Minors Act. Are there any accountants here? Am I right about that? But again, if you have one of those, you'll know it, I'll bet. College Savings Plan, the 529 plan they're called, or sometimes it's called OTTA, Ohio Tuition Trust Authority. That is put in as an asset of the parent, not the student. This might be more than what you need to know, but when the government processes your FAFSA, they take all of your financial information, puts it through this really complicated formula, and they come up with what's called an expected family contribution, an EFC. The EFC is a measure of how strong the family is financially. The lower the EFC, the more financial need you show, and the more likely you are to be eligible for more financial aid, a Pell Grant, for example. The college will get your FAFSA results, and they will award you the appropriate amounts. So depending on the EFC, if it's low enough, you'll be eligible for a Pell Grant, and every college will give you that same Pell Grant amount depending on the EFC. I think the government takes a small percentage of the parents' income and assets and puts it toward this EFC amount. They put a much larger percentage of the student's income, if any, and assets, if any, toward this EFC amount. The biggest variable when it comes to determining the EFC is adjusted gross income. That's by far the biggest variable. Some parents get worried because they have assets. They think, well, I own these rental properties, I have this, I have that, I'm going to get killed. But the truth is, a lot of the assets are protected. The biggest thing is adjusted gross income. Okay? Question? Stock options, you're getting out of my area. So you don't own the stock. But it hasn't been given to you yet. Then no, it's not counted as an asset. Her question is the 529 plan, it's in the name of the other child? Right. No, I would say it's just the child that's submitting the FAFSA, but it goes in the parent section as an asset. Okay. And another question, like grandparents, if the grandparent has some type of savings plan for children, that doesn't count. It's strictly the parent, the income for the parent. Another question sometimes parents and families have, what if the child is out of the household? They don't live with the parents. They live with grandma and grandpa. The only way you would include the grandparents on the FAFSA is if they have legally adopted the child. If it's custody, they have custody of the child, which is usually the case, you need to still include the parent. So hopefully they have contact with the parent and they're able to get the information and complete the FAFSA. The only way around that is if there's some type of toxic situation where the student had to leave the household, contact the school's financial aid office. At Kent State, we call it a dependency override form that you complete. And if it's approved, the student becomes what's called an independent student, and only the student's income gets included on the FAFSA. And that gets me into another thing, I'm off track, but dependent students have to include their parents on the FAFSA. Independent students do not include their parents on the FAFSA. When you're working through the FAFSA, there's a section on dependency, and you have to be able to answer yes to one of the questions. The most popular questions are you 24 years old? Are you in graduate school? Are you married? Do you have a child that you support? Are you a military veteran? Are you an orphan or a ward of the court? Are you legally emancipated? Are you homeless? Until you can answer yes to one of those questions, you have to include your parent on the FAFSA. Remember the government's philosophy, it's the family's responsibility to the extent they're able to pay. And if students had a choice, nobody would be dependent. Everybody would be out of the household. Her question is, do you have to fill out a FAFSA? No, but we encourage all students to complete the FAFSA for several reasons. One, you don't truly know you'll be eligible for a Pell Grant until you do the FAFSA. It's very possible you won't, but you don't know for sure until you do the FAFSA. You don't have to use this federal student loan, but it's nice to have the FAFSA on record and have the school awarded it to you. I didn't say that right, but if the school has the FAFSA and they have a loan awarded, you could get that money quickly. Like, let's say halfway through the semester, your car breaks down and you need a lot of money right away. If you've done the FAFSA, you can get that loan quickly. Whereas if you haven't done the FAFSA, it's several weeks before that money's going to transfer and you're going to get it. Another reason we encourage students to do the FAFSA is for scholarships. Oftentimes, scholarships will say you have to show financial need. You show financial need by doing the FAFSA. Even if you're not eligible for gift aid, like a Pell Grant, almost everyone shows financial need, but you have to have done the FAFSA. Also, you have to submit the FAFSA to be eligible for federal work study, an online or an on-campus job. So that's another reason to do the FAFSA. So we encourage students to do the FAFSA. That's a good question. Anything else right now before we move on? Yes. Another good question. His question is, does it factor in more than one student in college? Yes, it does. And that's another really big variable on the EFC. They ask you how many people are in the household, and they ask you how many of those people are students. If it's one student, the EFC is going to be so much. If it's two students, the EFC is half right there. So yeah, that's a good question. They do ask that. Very good. Ready to move on? And again, the FAFSA is very clear on what is an asset and what is not an asset. So read it carefully. Retirement accounts are not included as an asset. Your home is not included. Small businesses are not included. Family farms are not included. But again, it's very clear on what they want. They're just, take the time to read it, I guess, is the biggest thing. Once you reach the final page, the student simply clicks the sign button. Because remember, the student already typed in their username password to get into the FAFSA to begin with. So they already know the student's username password. For the parent is going to enter their username password and then click sign. So again, it's very important for the parent to sign it electronically. Every year, Kent State starts uploading FAFSAs, and there are a number of rejected FAFSAs for a variety of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is the parent didn't sign. It's interesting because the parent included their income on the FAFSA, but for whatever reason, it didn't click that they had to sign it. So then we have to contact the student, and the student has to get this straightened out. So try to avoid that. When you click submit, you will immediately get a confirmation page on your computer screen. On that confirmation page, it's going to give you the expected family contribution, the EFC. This one is 0. Well, they show the most financial need. It all depends on your income and all that, what your EFC is. It will also tell you how much of a Pell Grant you are eligible for, if any. And again, depending on income, it's very possible you won't be eligible for a Pell Grant. And then it will also tell you direct Stafford loan. We'll talk about federal student loans. That's the student loan, and there will be an amount there. Freshmen are allowed to have $5,500. If there is no amount there for EFC and there's no amount for the loan, that's a hint that you made a mistake on the FAFSA. Go back and figure out what went wrong. And like the lady over here mentioned, within 2 to 3 days, you will get an email telling you that they processed your FAFSA and that the SAR, the student aid report, is available. Again, we encourage you to go to the FAFSA website, log back in, and look over that SAR, that student aid report, and try to catch any mistakes. Also on the FAFSA, I forgot to mention, there's a section where you select all the schools you're interested in. And you can select as many schools as you want. There are drop-down menus where it's state and then school. So if you're going to Kent State, you would choose Ohio, and then you would go down to the K's for Kent State. If you are interested in Penn State, you would start with Pennsylvania, and then you would scroll down and select Penn State. Only those schools will receive your FAFSA results electronically from the government. The school runs it through a computer awarding program and creates your award letter. At Kent State, we're hoping to start sending award letters out in November, and then we just keep sending them out as we get new FAFSAs. But it depends on the school, on that part of it. Question?
So what happens if they decide on a school that was not on the original list?
Her question is, what if you decide to go to a school that wasn't on your original list? You would go back to the FAFSA, log in, and make a correction and add that new school. Good question. When you log into the FAFSA, there's a button that says make corrections to a submitted FAFSA. You would click on there, go to the section about choosing the school selection, and add that school. There was a question over here. The second question? Yes, any correction at all, that's what you would do. You would log in, click the make corrections to a processed FAFSA button, and make the correction. There's a question up here? No? Okay, there was a question right here. Her question is, does scholarships have any effect on this? No. No. No, oh, I see what you mean. Scholarships from the school does not affect your federal aid eligibility. You will get the appropriate Pell Grant regardless of how much scholarship the particular school awards you. Same with the loan. You will be eligible for $5,500 freshman level student loan regardless of how large the scholarship the school offers you. Now, for next year's FAFSA, you do not include financial aid as a student asset. Like scholarships, grants, loans, those do not get included as assets for the student. Yes?
So it sounds like you're saying they apply senior year after October 1st, and then they have to reapply.
Correct. The following year's FAFSA becomes available October 1st of every year. So the FAFSA you're interested in, 2018-2019, is now available. It's been available for just a handful of days. Next October, you will go and submit the 2019-2020 FAFSA for the 2019-2020 award year, school year. Okay? There's a question up here. Give me a moment. Yes? It's another good question. Her question is the EFC the amount you are expected to pay? The answer is no. I wish they would use a different term than expected family contribution, because logically you would think that's the amount they expect you to pay and then somebody else is going to pick up the rest. It's not that at all. It's a measure of how strong the family is financially. It's not how much you have to pay at all. It's strictly a measure of how strong the family is financially. The lower the EFC, the more financial need you show and the more likely you are to be eligible for more aid. Okay. Anything else? Yes. No. Her question, what tax return do you use? It's 2016, period. So if you submit the FAFSA now, it's 2016 tax return. If you wait until January or February, you're still doing the 2018-19 FAFSA and you're still using the 2016 tax return. Okay, anything else before we move on? Yes. Good question. We're going to get to that. I think it might be the next slide. Let's see. Here it is. The FAFSA is based on income from 2 years previous, period. If the family has lost income for a variety of reasons, so that the current family income is less than what it shows on the FAFSA, you contact the school's financial aid office. At Kent State, you submit a form called Special Circumstances. And the form is clear on what we need. If it's job loss, when did you lose your job? Are you on unemployment? If so, how much and when does it end? If it's divorce, when did that happen? They may ask you for a copy of your W-2 or your current pay stub to know how much you're making right now and how much was lost. Sometimes medical and dental expenses will count. Now, there's a counselor up at the Kent Campus Financial Aid Office. All she does is these special circumstances forms, and she takes the family's new financial situation and she calculates a new EFC. And the hope is the EFC goes down enough for the student to be eligible for more financial aid, although there's no guarantee. So if this applies to you, contact the school's financial aid office to find out their procedures. And scholarships. The Pell Grant is by far the biggest federal grant program. There are smaller federal grants, the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, the SEOG. Has anybody heard that? The Ohio grant is called the Ohio College Opportunity Grant, the OCOG. But the Pell Grant's by far the biggest. So that's why I just say Pell Grant. If the EFC is low enough, yes. So you may be eligible for multiple grants depending on the situation. Scholarships are the other big gift aid section. So when it comes to gift aid, what you don't pay back, it's grants and scholarships mostly. Oh. I'm sorry, guys. I'll get it. Okay, here we go. I think I've already mentioned this anyway. There's a question up here. Let me...
If we had one of these changes in circumstance, we would have to wait until we chose which college we're going to, and we cannot change that on the FAFSA.
His question, if you're a special circumstances case, yes, you do have to wait till you choose your college, or at least narrow it down to a handful, and then contact their financial aid offices to find out how to get their form and what type of documentation they require. Yes. Okay, about scholarships. When I talk to students about scholarships, I break it into three main parts. First, and most important, scholarships from the school. That's probably the biggest one. And it all depends on the school how they do this. At Kent State, with the number of students we have, you have to be accepted by a certain date. As long as you have applied and been accepted by a certain date, the admissions office will look at your GPA, SAT, ACT, class rank, all of that, and they'll make a scholarship offer, if any, and then send you a scholarship letter. It depends on the school. Other schools, especially private schools, it may be much more of a process. It may be a separate application. There may be essays letters of recommendation, all that sort of thing. It all depends on the school. It's your responsibility to find out the school's deadlines and processes. Second is local scholarships, like the Kiwanis Club or the Rotary Club, the Italian American Club. It seems like every year the repository does an article about, you know, how the Italian American Festival was downtown this year? All of their profits go toward their scholarship program. A good way to find local scholarships are high school websites. Like I checked out Glen Oak's website this morning and I got to a certain point, but you go to the guidance department and then there's a link to the local scholarships. I think you have to have a username password. So that's as far as I got. But most schools in the area are not that advanced yet. So you could check out other high schools too. There's nothing wrong with that. Public libraries, you know how the Stark County District Library, the Summit County District Library has branch locations? The reference desk librarian might be plugged in about what's available locally. You know, you're not going to be the only person asking them that question. But local scholarships are number 2. Third, you might want to try one or two of those large scholarship search engines, like fastweb.com is a popular one. They're all kind of similar. They ask you questions like what's your major, what's your GPA, etc., and they give you a list of possible scholarships. When it comes to these external independent organization scholarships, they say January, February, and March is the best time of the year to search for those scholarships for the following school year. Although it's strictly up to the organization when their deadline is. Yes. Pardon? Yes. For most of these external scholarship organizations, let's say the Plain Township Rotary Club, usually they have an application window from January, February, and March for the following school year. So for the fall and spring of that following year. But again, that's completely separate from the school. You know, applying for scholarships from the school, that's a whole different thing that I talked about at the very beginning. If you're willing to write a good essay, that puts you on the inside track because students hate to write the essay. So if you're willing to do that, you'd be surprised what little competition there is because of that. And again, it's your chance to set yourself apart. Usually modesty is a good quality, but not when it comes to applying for scholarships and applying to schools. It's, you know, you need to convince them you're the student they want. Okay, moving on to loans. When people talk about federal student loans, they're talking about Stafford loans. Unlike the Pell Grant, loans are based on grade level. Freshmen are allowed to have $5,500 per year. Kent State is a semester school, so fall semester, spring semester, so we would split that amount evenly between the two semesters, $2,750 and $2,750. If your school is on quarters, they would split it into thirds. Subsidized and unsubsidized, if the EFC is low enough, you will be eligible for a subsidized loan, which is interest-free while you're in school. The government pays the interest while you're in school. I think of it as the government subsidizing you or helping you out, so that's the better of the two loans. Best case scenario, $3,500 will be subsidized and $2,000 will be unsubsidized. If the EFC is too high, then you may not get as much subsidized, you may not get any subsidized at all. But regardless, you're going to be eligible for $5,500 total. When it comes to student loans, and again, your goal should be to minimize loan debt, but if you need to use a loan, your federal student loan is by far your best option. You are automatically accepted. By submitting the FAFSA, you are automatically eligible for this loan. It's strictly in the student's name. There's no cosigner or credit check like you'd run into at a bank. The interest rate is 4.5%. That's much better than anything you'll find at a bank. Banks know that students use this first and then come to them if they need additional money, so they jack up interest rates. You're going to be looking at like 9 or 10% from a bank, even with a good cosigner. You can pay the loan down early without penalty. That's another advantage. Usually a bank hits you with a prepayment fee if you pay it down early. The federal government won't. Finally, the federal government is a lot more liberal when it comes to different repayment options than a bank would be. The standard repayment plan is 10 years long. If you can't swing that, you can stretch it out to 15, 20 years, which lowers your monthly payment a lot, although you pay a lot more over the length of the whole loan because interest accrues all that time. There's also a couple nice options that are income-based. I think they call it pay-as-you-go. So if you graduate and you have a relatively lower paying job, your monthly payment's lower. But if you get a better paying job, your monthly payment goes up. Banks don't really offer any of that stuff. So, like I said, when it comes to a loan, use this first. And like Kim Leggett was saying, my understanding is the Canton Student Loan Foundation does offer better terms than banks. So if you need to go a private loan on top of this, check them out. Any questions on this page? Yes. Good question. Her question, it is only interest-free while you're in school. Once you leave school, you graduate or you just drop out, interest starts to accrue when repayment begins. It's only subsidized while you're in school. Second, it doesn't matter who pays it down. If grandma and grandpa helps the student pay it down early, that's fine. You can pay the principal down early without penalty. You can also pay the interest as you go along. If you use an unsubsidized loan, every 6 months you get paperwork from the government saying how much interest accrued. If you're able to pay it as you go along, that would save you over the length of the entire loan also. Okay? Okay, let me try to explain this. If you still need additional money, you know, the scholarships, the grants, and the freshman loan is not enough to cover your costs. One option is what's called a Parent Plus loan. PLUS is short for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. It's a federal loan through the FAFSA in the parent's name. You can look at the terms, but the parent applies. That last bullet, if parent is denied, student can request an additional $4,000 federal unsubsidized loan. Unlike with the student loan, the Parent Plus loan, the government does run a credit check. And if the parent is denied, then the student is eligible for additional unsubsidized loan on top of the $5,500 they're already getting. And we have parents who know their credit score and they apply for this expecting to be denied, and that's a legitimate strategy so that the student gets the extra $4,000. But again, it's a loan. So if you don't need that additional $4,000, don't use it. Questions on this? Now, if the parent wants everything to be in the student's name, then the Parent Plus loan is not an option. and you're going to have to look into what we call an alternative loan. Some schools call them private loans. It's a student loan from a bank. You can go to any bank you want. It pays to compare banks, get the best terms you can. And again, that Canton Student Loan Foundation, it does offer better terms than a bank, so you check them out also, if you need to go down this road at all. Questions? Okay, determining college costs. Let me see how I can explain that. All schools are required to come up with what's called a cost of attendance or a budget. It's estimates for the main costs a student may incur. It's made up of both direct costs and indirect costs. The cost of attendance is not what you owe the school. For example, here's cost of attendance for Kent State Stark campus. Tuition and fees. Full-time tuition at the Stark campus for the year is about $5,700. Or if you split it into semesters, that would be about $2,800 per semester. At Kent State, once you reach full-time, 12 hours, tuition is capped. So if you take 12 hours, if you take 17 hours, it's the same amount. It all depends on the school. But Stark campus, we're a commuter campus. There are no residence halls, no food plans or anything like that. But we still make an estimate for room and board, even though you're living at home. So that's one reason why this amount is so much. That amount is not what you owe. At Stark campus, you owe this much. That's your direct cost. That's your out-of-pocket cost. Now, if you're at the Kent campus, where you could live on campus, a residence hall and a food plan, it cost you more. So this cost of attendance at the Kent campus is about $25,000. But again, that's not your direct cost. I think tuition at the Kent campus is about $10,000 a year, $5,000 per semester. If you live on campus, depending on how expensive the room is and what type of food plan you get, it's about $10,000 more. So if you're living on campus, you're looking at about $20,000 out of pocket. Other schools, there are schools in Ohio that's every bit as expensive as Ivy League. So it all depends on the school. But again, that's not what you owe. Okay? You need to determine your direct costs. And that's another thing. Public colleges like Kent State, you owe a certain amount, period, regardless of who you are. No matter if you're a billionaire or you're a regular person, you owe the same amount. Private schools, they really do it differently. They look at your income and they kind of decide what they think you can afford. And they'll give you scholarships to make up the difference. So, the College of Worcester, I shouldn't say a certain, but if it's an expensive school, you go to their website, their tuition is way, way up there, but hardly anybody pays that amount. So you've got to factor all that in. You have to determine your direct cost to the school, subtract your financial aid, and see how much you still owe. It's not how much scholarship they offer you, it's how much you still owe, right? Remember that. Okay, good. Do you have questions on this? Did I explain it as well as I could? But again, at Stark campus, it's nice because tuition is about $5,800. So even if a student can't afford anything out of pocket, they're not getting a scholarship, they're not getting a Pell Grant, their student loan of $5,500 is almost enough to cover. But if you're at a more expensive school, that's not the case. Pell Grants, I didn't mention this, but the biggest Pell Grant this year is $5,960 for the year, or $2,980 per semester. So if you're eligible for the biggest Pell Grant, that would cover your tuition at Stark Campus. Do you understand a little bit better what's going on? Okay, a timeline of what to do and what to expect. Again, the FAFSA is now available. Again, at Kent State, we're hoping to start sending award letters out in November and December. But once you get your award letters, that's when you determine your direct costs, subtract your financial aid, and then you'll know where you're at. And here's another hint. If you live on campus, at least at Kent State, different rooms cost different amounts. If you're in a newer residence hall that's air conditioned, that's going to cost more. A single costs more than a double. And then they have food plans. Like, my understanding is the regular food plan is good enough for just about everybody. You know, guys, gals, everybody. But there's also a Premier plan and a Premier Plus plan, which you don't really need. So that kind of thing too. What else? Now, the scholarship award letter is different from the federal award letter. Once you get accepted to the school will send you a scholarship award letter that will list the school's scholarships that they've decided to award you. That's different from the award letter, which is from the federal financial aid, grants and loans. Now, the school may include their scholarships on the award letter. So you may have Pell Grant, loan, and school scholarship. That's fine. Understand? Yes. It's a good question. At Kent State, we only send award letters to accepted students. So we could get your FAFSA results next week, but until you get accepted, we won't actually award you. And I think most schools would probably be that way. Yes, but not necessarily. Another thing, at least at Kent State, we do a paper award letter in the mail for incoming freshmen. Not all schools do. Sometimes it's an email. Every school has an online student account. We're the Golden Flashes, so we call it Flashline. Students go into Flashline and they can register for classes, they can drop classes, they can check their bill, they can pay their bill, they can view their financial aid, they can accept their loans. Next year, when you're a sophomore, we're not going to send you a paper award letter to save money. We'll send you an email and we'll tell you that you're awarded and to go into Flashline. Some schools, they don't do paper award letters at all, even for incoming freshmen. So be aware of the school's policies on that. Here are a couple upcoming events at Star Campus. It's on your page. I know I've gone about an hour already, but it's on your handout. Here's our information at Stark Campus. If you're interested in Kent State, don't hesitate to contact us. If you're interested in another school, you really should contact that school's financial aid office to find out their particular policy and their particular deadlines, etc. Do you have any questions while we're all here? Okay, great. Well, I wish you good luck. Thank you for such close attention. I'll stay here for a little while if you have any questions. There's one question before I leave, but if you have a personal question, I'll wait around and answer it. Yes. Her question is, on the FAFSA, do they ask you what your degree is? No. They ask you what year you're in, like brand new freshman, sophomore, junior, graduate student, but they don't ask degree. No. Yes, that is what you say. For CCP students, I guess students who have taken classes at high school that's going to transfer to the college, you are still considered a new freshman, never attended before, even though you're going to have transfer hours. Even if they actually go to the school during the school day, yes. Change it, yes. Yeah, make a correction on that. Anything else? All right, great. Well, again, thanks again. Good luck.